So we're here for another week of A-League talk, and not gonna lie, it just feels like a bit of another week in the A-League. It isn't. There were some great games last week, and there's some big games coming up this week, but just talking about the league as a whole this week just feels a bit, I don't know, it doesn't feel like much of, note is gonna happen in the next couple of weeks. Like, over the first 7 games, they've been great because, you know, you've been kind of seeing where the teams are at now and everything like that. But at the moment, I think we kind of know where a lot of the teams are at. And it's more just about if they can play that way consistently. And that's entertaining, but it takes time. So I think my goal for next week is to not do a boring ass, like, review of 1 week and next up on. Like, I think I'll still touch on all the games, but maybe I'll do it in a different way where I can talk about some more overarching things in the league. But at the moment, I mean, I have no ideas about the overarching things in the league. All I can think of is, like, well, people were talking about boutique stadiums a while ago, and otherwise no idea. But anyway, yeah, we're going to be talking about last week and this week. And I did some Instagram polls, which I'm also going to talk about. But yeah, we'll start with last week because that happened first. And it kicked off with a Friday night doubleheader. The first game of the night was against, or not against, it was between Central Coast Mariners and Western United. And it ended 4-0 in favour of the Mariners. And for me, there's not really much to say here. The Mariners smashed them. Like, they look comprehensively better than Western United, and Western United looked terrible. So that's not really that much of an achievement in my mind. Like, I'm not trying to take away from the happiness of the Mariners fans. Do crazy shit. You've won 4-0 at home. Sounds fantastic. But, yeah, as a neutral, I'm not really asked that the Mariners won 4-0. I would have preferred if Western actually did well, to be honest. So yeah, 4-0, I mean, great result for the Mariners. They get some good points on the board as well. I mean, any points are good points early when you're playing crap. Yeah, they get that, and I'm sure they'll be happy. But overall, bit of a nothing game. Then we had Perth Glory against Melbourne City, and my interest in this game was because of Melbourne City. They are obviously a massive club. I mean, so are Perth, but at the moment, in terms of, like, impacting trophies, Melbourne City have had the most impact in recent history, right? And, yeah, I'm therefore interested to see how they do because this is their first year really falling off. And they went out and they won against Perth, 2-1. It looked a really gritty game. Like, I don't think there was that much good football on display, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a fight for Melbourne City, and it looks like they fought well. Towards the end, Perth were putting a lot of pressure on them, or at least had good field position, and Melbourne City were kind of on the back foot. They came away with the win, and that's really impressive for a couple of reasons. I've already talked about how they've had to travel a lot recently. Like, their last, 5 games would have been in Wellington, Japan, Newcastle, Perth, and somewhere else. Yeah, they've had a tough schedule recently, is my point, but they've also just had a far more vast schedule than every other team in the league. I mean, not, you know, massive differences to some teams, but big differences to a lot of the teams, because Perth were going into this game having played 8 competitive fixtures this season. They played the cup game in, like, July or something, and then 7 league fixtures. Whereas Melbourne City have been playing in the Australia Cup since August. I mean, it's been like a game every month, except maybe like the last one where it would have been 2 or something. But yeah, overall, they've played like 16 games, and I don't know, I think that's just got to have some wear and, well, you know, bring about some wear and tear, especially when you consider, right, that they've probably played the most games in, like, Australian football over the last couple of years. They've had Champions League consistently, they've gone on cup runs consistently, and, you know, now they've got plenty of games as well. So, I mean, point is that they'll be tired, they'll be struggling, they got to win against Perth. And I think that, despite it looking a rather crap game, I think it's a fixture that, or a win that Melbourne City can take great pride in. So, yeah, that was Friday night. Then we move on to Saturday, which had 2 crazy games. First one was Newcastle versus Wellington. And Newcastle smashed Wellington 3-0. And this is a weird one to talk about because I'm not really asked that the Jets won 3-0. Like, I don't think it means they're going to do anything this season, really. I think the Jets are still a terrible side that can just be annihilated by a lot of teams in the league. But on the weekend, they annihilated Wellington. And, well done. Like, I just don't think it's going to lead to much. But Stamatopoulos has been quite a consistent goal scorer for the Jets this season. I think he picked up a couple on the weekend. He might have picked up a couple against the Wanderers. And then I think he scored in some of their other matches as well. But he's looking promising. I mean, I've never really taken that much note of him. But, besides when he picks up goals, obviously. But yeah, it's a good win for Newcastle. And speaking of getting points on the board, they did. They're on 8 points. They're in 8th place. And they're actually 2 points outside of the top 6. So they could potentially be putting themselves into a good position in a couple of weeks' time. But I think come the end of the season, they probably won't be in the top 6 is my point on Newcastle. As for Wellington, they got, as I said, annihilated. And I don't think this is that surprising. Like, the fact that it happened now is a bit surprising when they've had harder games this season. But Wellington have looked like a flawed side. I've said all year they're relying on luck. And when that works for them, it's great. And they're sitting in 3rd place right now. So the overwhelming amount of time Wellington have relied on good fortune, which isn't actually a thing, right? Like, it's their players doing things well. It's just a bit dodgy is what I mean. But they looked dodgy on the weekend, and it didn't go their way. Things didn't fall their way, and they lost 3-0. I mean, you had Paulson making a mistake for one of the goals that they conceded. There was a penalty, which, you don't expect Paulson to save, but you kind of would, right? And he just didn't, which is fine. But yeah, that's 2 goals right there that in, many other games this season, they wouldn't have conceded. Like, it's just an unlucky game for them. And my kind of idea of Wellington now is that they aren't, like, they're not going to do that every week now. They're not going to be a side that gets trounced by, like, Western United and Perth and Central Coast and Newcastle. And am I forgetting any other bad teams? Don't think so. Yeah, they're not going to get trounced by them regularly, I don't think. Also, they're not going to go back to being, like, perfect and lucky and just, having all these things go their way. Like, I think they're going to have games like this where they're just second best because at the end of the day, I think they're a mid-table team. So, yeah, that was the first game on Saturday. Newcastle, big win against Wellington. And fuck it, I'll do it now because I remember the Instagram polls. And yeah, instead of doing disaster class or shit show or whatever I called it of the week, because that was obvious. Western United are bottom of the table with 6 losses in a row, 1 goal in those games, and they've just come off a 4-0 loss. That they are the obvious shit show of the A-League. So I went for bottle job of the weekend, and the voting options for me were Wellington Phoenix for this game, Adelaide for the game against Brisbane, and Western Sydney for the game against Melbourne Victory. Because for me, they were 2 or 3 top 6 sides that were all kind of disappointing in big matches. It wasn't even a big match for Wellington. It should have been a walk in the park for them, but instead they got trounced 3-0. And yeah, I think it's a fair vote for bottle job of the week. Although every week for the rest of time, Western Sydney are the bottle jobs. But yeah, that was bottle job of the week, and I will address the other poll that I did when we get to it. But before we get to it, Sydney FC took on Macarthur. Sydney FC made 2 mistakes, in my opinion, that cost us that match. The first one was whatever Andrew REDmayne was attempting to do. I'm assuming he was trying to kind of play sweeper keeper and cover the defense and let them play a high line. He didn't look committed to it. Is what I'm trying to say. Or maybe he's just old, maybe he's just not suited to the role. On the field, it looked like he wasn't really committed to it. And he ended up 1-on-1 outside of his box with a Macarthur player. And it should be noted that a Sydney FC player, I believe Lacerda, got significantly behind REDmayne at an angle to block the shot of whoever had the ball for Macarthur, right? But the person with the ball from Macarthur took a shot and it hit Andrew REDmayne's arm behind his body and went out for a throw-in, I think. Or REDmayne followed it up and put it out for a throw-in. But yeah, I bring note to those things, not to take away from the stupidity of the situation from a Sydney FC perspective, but to call VAR bullshit. Because what you've got is an iffy handball. It's behind him. Like, I know he's a keeper out of his box, but in no way is he using his arms to make himself big. Like, he's not putting them in a position where, you know, the guy can't take a shot. It's just behind his arm. It's kind of dangling, and it's iffy. Like, if the ref gives that a handball on the field, then fair enough. That's a handball. But no, he didn't give it a handball on the field, and instead he went over to the VAR booth. So, I mean, he's got to determine that that is clearly, by whatever definition, a handball. I haven't even reread the rules, so I don't know if that's defined as a handball clearly in the game, but if it is, okay. But then the reasoning given for the red card was denying a goal-scoring opportunity. It's got to be a clear and obvious... I mean, I guess it is a goal-scoring opportunity, but I suppose if it is goal-scoring opportunity, right, that's the definition, not just the name of it. If the definition is denying it... But every fucking part of the game's a goal-scoring opportunity, right? Anytime you got the ball in their half, it's a goal-scoring opportunity. Even further out if you're Xabi Alonso. But point is that it's a professional foul. That's why he was sent off, as far as I'm concerned. This may all be entirely wrong, but he was sent off for a professional foul. I don't know how VAR can overturn any of that clearly and obviously is actually my point. So, yeah, a bit disjointed there. I was set on the point, but as I was saying it slowly and breaking it down, I started to second guess myself, but I don't. I think that's a yellow at worst. Like, he's out there, his arm's behind his back, there's a player behind him, it's a long shot, it's like 30 yards out. I mean, look at the other chances MacArthur missed. I shouldn't shit talk about missing chances, but for me, overturning that is ridiculous, and I don't know how you can find a way to call that a clear and obvious error from the referee. But I'll move on from that because that's not even the main thing I wanted to talk about, but it was a mistake from Sydney FC. And the other one was the goal we conceded, which was really poor from us because... So, I think it was Giancarlo, the number 98 for MacArthur. I think he's Frenchy and bald and stuff, and he scored their final goal. But he had the ball for MacArthur on the left-hand side of our box from, you know, the defensive perspective. And the defense were getting back. MacArthur had moved the ball quickly. That's what they do. And Davila was making a bombing run down the middle. And at this point, 3 players were back. One was covering Giancarlo with the ball. I'm assuming that's his name. 2 of them were in the middle covering Davila. And Ryan Grant, I swear to God, I don't know if this is factual, but he was staring at Holman's brother, Holman, for MacArthur, running forward, bombing forward. And then he's looking at Davila making a run. And he runs in and goes to join defending Davila, which for me was just diabolical. And I don't actually know if any of that's true, but I do know that it was horrible communication or an absolute piss take from Ryan Grant for the first goal that Sydney FC conceded. And yeah, it's a bit frustrating to see is my point. But I mention these mistakes to bring you to the fact that we are with 10 men. Paddy Wood's been subbed off. We've got Pavlicic in goal. That's not a problem. A lot of people might think like, oh, they've got a backup keeper, but no. In Pavlicic, we trust. I don't think there was any doubt about Pavlicic on the night. But we're down to 10 men. We're 1-0 down. And this is where I get to praise Sydney FC, and it makes me so happy because I haven't got to do an awful lot of that lately. We stayed with the game, both mentally and in the way we played. We didn't see our players' heads drop. We saw them constantly pushing. Like, after we went 2-0 down, we were still pushing for a goal, which, you know, we'll see how that lasts if we keep losing games. I hope, you know, it lasts until the players drop dead. But we'll see how it lasts. But it's good to see now. And more importantly, we had a distinct style of play that we have committed to previously in previous games under Rufuk Talay. And we went out and we tried to maintain the entire game. And sure, it wasn't ideal, but because the problem was we were doing really well, like keeping MacArthur penned in and winning the ball back in the midfield before it can even get to Davila. I think Bratton was fantastic. Like, he would have had a lot of passes into the final third that were like counted as misplaced. But for me, Bratton was all over the place, just winning a lot of tackles, putting pressure on everyone in the midfield. And I'm sure Holman did a great job as well. I didn't take particular note of Holman, but yeah, we were playing with a 2-man midfield. and they were everywhere, it seemed, or at least Bratton was. So I think it was fantastic there. Our problem was just, firstly, getting the ball into the final third. We had some atrocious set pieces and some atrocious balls to the forwards. And then, yeah, we had a problem with finishing again, which was quite frustrating. And yeah, like, look, our players look good. I mean, the Mac almost goal was really good. And like, technically, like, it was 99.9% perfect. He was an inch offside, and otherwise, he did everything perfectly and nearly made me come. But in the end, yeah, it counted for nothing, and that's the problem. We walked away with that game getting nothing out of it. I mean, we can take moral wins and mental victories, but we didn't even get a fucking goal. I mean, we lost out of that game more than what you get when you usually lose a game, because REDmayne will be missing the Melbourne victory game. Again, Pavlicic will step up, but yeah, we've technically lost more things than just points that we could have had from this game, is my point. So yeah, that kind of sucks, but I don't know. Overall, on we march, bring on the Tards, and I can't keep talking about Sydney FC. I'm sure I'm going to talk about the Big Blue in great depth when we get to it. So I'll just touch on MacArthur, who I think were good. Like, I speak about how good Sydney FC were, but MacArthur walk away from that game with a clean sheet, and they scored a couple of lovely goals, and, you know, their 7 fans there got to rip a flare and see them win a big game against the mighty Sydney FC. So, and it put them top of the table. They're still undefeated. Absolutely nothing wrong with MacArthur. I can't give them shit. Yeah, fair play to them. And we'll just move on to Sunday, which had Brisbane versus Adelaide. For me, Brisbane were way better than Adelaide. Like, just because Adelaide was so disappointing. They looked a really good side this season, especially early on. They looked like they were putting to bed the woes that they've previously suffered, and then they all came flooding back this game. And in my opinion, Adelaide were turgid and boring and deserved to lose against Brisbane, who were far more clinical and a clearly better side. Jay O'Shea's awesome as well. Let's move on to the Wanderers victory game, which, before we get into talking about the two worst teams in the A-League, in my opinion, they might actually be the 2 best, but they're scum, so fuck them. But before we get into that, you got to talk about Bruno FOURnaroli, because we did just witness a phenomenal striker performance. Like, his Newcastle one was good. Like, whatever. And he's broken some record. First player to score 4 goals twice in a season. But this one was a big game against another good team that they're going to be competitive. I mean, they've jumped them on the table, surely. So a team that they're going to be competitive with throughout the season, most likely, away from home, in, you know, a heat wave weekend. He's picked up 3 scintillating goals and a sexy penalty. So, yeah, for me, that's one of the all-time big scoring striker performances. The other one that stands out for me is Bobo against Perth, where he picked up 6. But yeah, Bruno FOURnaroli got his team the points and put in an all-time striker performance. Also got himself over 100 A-League goals in his career, which is just another terrific milestone. So, like, I get the appeal of FOURnaroli. I get why people say they love him, but it would be remiss of me to not admit that he's a punchable prick, and I hate him. But legendary performance. Anyway, we'll move on to the game, where I think Wanderers were really disappointing. Don't let the scoreline fool you. If you didn't watch this, if you have some self-respect, then Wanderers were shit. They scored 2 goals late that never really threatened Melbourne victory. And other than that, it was a complete drubbing from the Melbourne victory side. And most of the reason that happened was because they had Bruno FOURnaroli being clinical. And I think I may have alluded to it in like a previous video, but FOURnaroli, I mean, I think maybe against MacArthur and Wellington looked a little bit wank, and that's probably, I mean, looking back on it now, why they drew those. No, it isn't. They've got other mistakes as well. But looking back on those, it's a big reason why they didn't get the win there, is he had some sketchy moments. He didn't here, and it was the reason they got the win. But they played fantastic football throughout. They've been playing it pretty consistently throughout the season, and they got the win. I think they outdid Western Sydney Wanderers, and in my opinion, despite Wellington, Brisbane and Macarthur being ahead of them and two of those sides picking up results against Melbourne Victory, I think the Tards are probably going to be better come the end of the season. But we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to predict it now because I don't want to manifest its existence. But before we end the last week's segment, I would also like to mention that the masterclass of the weekend went to Melbourne Victory. And for me, I think there were a lot of votes for Newcastle as well. But for me, I agree with that. Melbourne Victory were extremely impressive and kind of deserved the win. So, yeah, good voting, everyone, on Instagram. But now we move on to match day 8 of the A-League, where we've got a Big Blue. That's the main fixture. I've actually been looking forward to this for months, and I've kind of felt bad about it because, like, on the days of the Perths and Macarthur games, I had thought about the Big Blue as well, which, like, I don't normally do, but I'm really looking forward to this game because it's down in Melbourne. It's not an Australia Day away, which, like, I love Australia Day away, but sometimes you kind of need a fucking proper nighttime, like, Melbourne game where it's dark, it's a bit colder. I mean, it's not going to be that much colder, but, I mean, hopefully it is. I think, I was looking at the weather, and I think it'd be, like, under 25, which should be colder than Australia Day, and, it's better in my opinion. Like, the Big Blue, it's nowhere near as sanitized as, like, the Derby or the Grand Finals or any of those, like, bigger home games. But yeah, for me, it's like you just kind of want a proper Melbourne Victory game, like, every once in a while. And I feel like that's what we're getting this Saturday. So I'm quite excited for that, but its time will come. First of all, Western United play Brisbane Roar. Do I have to entertain this absolute joke of a fixture? I mean, sure, Western United could win, but I'll spit some simple facts. Brisbane are in second. Western United are in last and haven't won in 6 games and have only scored 1 goal in that time period. I predict Brisbane to win 3-0. Then we move on to Western Sydney versus Adelaide. I would love to pile on and say Western Sydney will be shit. By the way, another Friday doubleheader. Love it. Great work, A-Leagues. But, yeah, Western Sydney take on Adelaide. And for me, Western Sydney will be winning this game. I think that while Western Sydney have looked flawed and, you know, they're coming off a defeat against Melbourne Victory, I think they have looked a quality side this year. And I think they'll actually be up for it against Adelaide. It's going to be at Bank West, which, you know, maybe if their fans... I won't even joke about it, but yeah, I don't know. I just see Western Sydney winning this one. They're, for me, a clearly better side than Adelaide. Maybe Adelaide can turn it around. I mean, they do have talented players, but for me, Adelaide have been really poor recently, and I don't think they're going to be getting the win against West Sydney away from home. So I'll predict a 3-1 Western Sydney Wanderers win. Then we've got Newcastle versus Perth Glory. It's in Newcastle, so I'm going to tip them. They're coming off a big win against Wellington, but it would be very Newcastle to not win here. So we'll have to wait and see. It's also a game that I don't even think I'm going to watch, and I don't really care about. I'll watch the highlights. I may even watch the extended highlights, but I'll be down in Melbourne getting pissed. So yeah, this game's kind of on the back burner, but to throw out a formal prediction, 1-0 Newcastle. Then, Big Blue. How do I think this game's going to go down? I worry for us. I've just come out and said Melbourne Victory are the best side in the league and Sydney FC have a lot of problems. But Sydney FC are Sydney FC. And because we are Sydney FC, we have the We Are Sydney vibes, man. Like, and we've looked okay. We've looked competent for a couple of weeks now. Who knows what we can do? Like, There is no fucking way we are losing this game. I'm not having it. We're not gonna lose. It's done as far as I'm concerned. There is, like, and it's fucked because I have logic, but I also have faith. And I have faith that Sydney FC will be winning this match. Like, and that's the thing, is it's there. We've got Fabio Gomez, we've got Lolly, we've got Mac, we've got defenders that are proven competent defenders. We've got midfielders that work tirelessly. I do worry about the midfield actually as well. Like that, I mean, that's the thing. Melbourne Victory have got a really good squad. Our players are going to need to step up. I feel like there is precedent for them doing that, because we've stepped up in games last year. Like, I mean, we beat Wanderers in finals. In my opinion, Wanderers were a better side than us. They had, a great run going into finals, and we beat them because we are Sydney, right? Like, there's defo the appeal there. I think the players know what it means to play for Sydney. I think they've even been a part of these kind of results towards the end of last season and, earlier on in their careers. So, yeah, I don't put it past this team. You get what I'm alluding to, but I will never not predict Sydney FC winning. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 win. Is it possible to get Burgess back by this weekend? No, fuck it. Casera's man of the match. Anyway, we'll move on to Melbourne City versus Central Coast, which, it's at home. I think Mariners could give them a match, but I'm going to go for Melbourne City here. I think their quality is shining through against crap teams. And don't get me wrong, good win for Mariners last weekend, but they're crap. So for me, Melbourne City will be getting the win here. And then we've got Macarthur versus Wellington, Monday the 18th of December at 7 p.m. I might try and work from home on Monday just so I can be fully prepared for the thriller that this is going to be. Macarthur played against Adelaide a couple of over a week ago, 2 rounds, something, an amount of time ago. I don't want to calculate it right now. And they're playing Wellington at home on a Monday again. The attendance will be atrocious, but the game will be phenomenal. It is a hidden gem. Like, I've said I'm going to go to so many fucking neutral A-League games over the last couple of years, and I think maybe I've been to 1 neutral A-League game. So I don't want to promise anything, but this game is begging to be delightful. I think it's going to be great because Macarthur looked like a good side with lots of holes, and Wellington looked like a bad side that's really good at poking at good sides' holes. And I don't know, I could see this being like a 4-5 kind of game. So you know what? I like Wellington more than Macarthur. I kind of tend to root for them. I am going to predict a 5-4 win to Wellington. Although I think Macarthur have a better squad, so I give them a good chance of winning as well. But, guys, I really wanted to keep this under 20 minutes. This has been filled with rants and rambles and just random shit. But I need to get a video out to you. I mean, I don't need to, but I want to because I love you. So, yeah, this is the video. I hope it's had some benefit to you, and otherwise please let me know your thoughts on anything I've said in the comments below, and I'll see you next time I do a video. Bye bye.